It is no secret that here in the state of Connecticut, election fraud is real. It happens all the time. We don't like to talk about that. We don't like to admit that. But when it's caught on camera, we're given no choice. And that is exactly what happened in this past municipal election.
So you are hearing just a snippet of the testimony that was done earlier this week. It was in our news. We did a full break on it, and boy, did we get a lot of phone calls on this. You're hearing from Representative Jason Perillo, and he was talking about more legislation in place and specifically more penalties in place for people who commit election crimes in our state. So Representative Perillo joins the show now to talk a little bit more about this and the likelihood that we actually will see action take place. So Representative Perillo, thank you so much for joining the show. Really appreciate your time. How are you?
I'm good, Melissa. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. You know, this garnered up a lot of phone calls on our morning show when I played your audio. I played the full clip, and you had voters in Bridgeport. You had voters all across our listening area all saying that regardless of party affiliation, regardless of whatever the election is, no matter how small and local to no matter how big and presidential, the fact that we don't have tougher penalties is inexcusable. Tell us, though, if you could sort of paint the picture for us here in Connecticut, what laws are currently on the books when it comes to holding people accountable for election fraud?
Oh, it's actually pretty well detailed, Melissa, in statute. Prohibitions against, forgery on ballots, improper administration of absentee ballots, inaccurate ballots presented to individuals, helping someone complete a ballot when you shouldn't be helping them. There's a number of different things that are spelled out in statute. And actually, the legislation that we've proposed here doesn't increase or add to that list. It just simply creates an accountability for individuals who actually break those existing laws and really puts some teeth behind the laws.
So help me to understand this, because I want to make sure I'm not getting this incorrect. So there are already laws on the books that say you can't, let's just say, stuff ballot boxes. Can't do that. But right now, the penalties are basically a slap on the wrist. Am I understanding that correctly?
There are no specific penalties per se. What has happened, though, if you look at the last 25 years, for even our most egregious election fraud violations, not one individual has seen a day of prison time in the last 25 years.
So what's the point of the law? I hate to say that, but then what's the point?
And right. I think that's exactly our point as well. Why have this law on the books? Why have these laws, plural, on the books if the enforcement is basically non-existent? So the legislation we've proposed creates a mandatory minimum of 12 months in prison for these most egregious election violations. Now, look, there's still due process. There's still the court system. Someone has to be determined to be guilty. But once that happens, once that due process is through, we've got to take these crimes seriously, and we've got to punish the perpetrators.
So we have Representative Jason Perillo here. Now, what's interesting about this, Representative Perillo, I want to commend you for stepping up and talking about this, because I have to confess to you that I have tried to talk about this with many lawmakers. Now, I will say I'll give Republicans a thumbs up, because every Republican lawmaker, from Senator Harding, Senator Kevin Kelly, Senator Huang, I mean, I've talked to many, and they all agree that what happened in Bridgeport this past mayoral election season, what happened in the primary election, and what was caught on camera, proven in a court to have been alleged absentee ballot fraud, I mean, that is inexcusable, and it cannot happen again. And to watch that video and to think we can just move on from this is inexcusable. However, I have I've reached out to the governor. I've reached out to the Secretary of the State. I've reached out to many lawmakers. And while, even Mayor Ganim himself, we have talked about it on the air. And while it seems like we want to put things in place to never allow what happened in Bridgeport this past election cycle to happen again, I'm not seeing where that's happening. I'm not seeing where it's being taken seriously. It seems like things were corrected for the mayoral race to be legitimate, for Mayor Ganim to legitimately have won that race. But I'm not seeing where we're seeing a big picture and, hey, let's stop this from ever happening again, not just in Bridgeport, but anywhere in Connecticut. What do you think?
Melissa, ballot fraud in Connecticut is the worst kept secret in politics. I received a call last night from a Democratic colleague thanking me for my testimony and the bill. And this individual said to me, you know what? It got caught on camera this time. This has been going on for decades. It's just that once it was on camera, something had to be done about it. So this isn't news. But to your point, do I really expect the Democratic majority in the House and the Senate to take action on this? I really don't. And it's a shame. Because quite honestly, and you mentioned it when we first started, when people call in to your show, Democrat or Republican, they still don't think. Voters don't want fraud. They really, truly don't. But we have here a situation where, honestly, and I hate to be partisan, but let's just be honest here. The Democratic machines that's been operating like this for decades, they have no interest in changing it. That's just the truth.
So we've got Representative Jason Perillo on the show with us, and earlier this week we played for you his public testimony. It was in front of a public hearing, and it was imposing mandatory jail time, essentially, for somebody who's caught abusing the election system, violating elections here in Connecticut. And you never said her name, but I said the name. It's okay. Representative Perillo, but you referred to this past election cycle in Bridgeport, and specifically without naming her, you were referring to Wanda Jeter Pataki, correct? I mean, her situation and the fact that she was literally caught on camera. A judge said that, which is why we had all the election redos. And then just this week, she was reelected almost, I want to say unanimously, to stay the vice chair of the Bridgeport Democratic Town Committee. So when we talk about situations like that, where you just said, before the break, you had a Democratic colleague say to you, yeah, no, this is a real problem. And, when it's caught on camera, it's kind of, you got to do something about it, right? Have you had any sort of support from your Democratic colleagues as far as would they speak up? Like, would they? I mean, we don't need closed door conversations. Is anyone willing to make a bipartisan effort to really change this? Because it's frustrating, I think, to any voters, again, regardless of their party affiliation.
Yeah, not one Democratic legislator has said to me, hey, you know what, Jason, this is a great thing, and I'm with you. Put my name on it. I want to be supportive. On what I've gotten, and a lot of my Republican colleagues would tell you the same thing. We've gotten lip service on this at best. I hate to say it, and it's a sad reality, but I would be shocked if this legislation goes anywhere, which is terrible. I mean, and you actually mentioned it, Melissa. I mean, we're at a point here in Connecticut where we practically reward this. And by we, I don't mean all of us. I mean, Democrats in certain towns. You get caught on camera committing ballot fraud, and you get elevated, and you're made vice chairman of your party committee. Where on earth could that happen, except for here?
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's. I don't mean to laugh, because obviously it's far from a laughing matter. It just, to me, logically, well, it's illogical. I guess that's the best way I could put it. It to me, it just, I don't know how it's become such, I'm going to call it dirty behind-the-scenes politics, and I don't really think a lot of people can argue with it. I mean, unless you fall under a party and you feel like you're under attack. But honestly, I think if people are being reasonable and you take the emotion out of it, I want to know when I go to vote in an election that it's not rigged. Period. I think everybody, no matter who you affiliate with or don't affiliate with, I would think every person who takes the effort to go and vote for any election wants to know it is not rigged. I mean, my 5-year-old, who knows nothing about voting, could tell you that. So I just don't understand how we've gotten to this point. And what's, I guess, again, like you said, very concerning about it, Representative Perillo, is if we're just going to act like it didn't happen, I mean, I guess to what end, right? I mean, to what end? Like, it would make me question, and maybe I'm going down a rabbit hole, but it would make me question, is this happening in other towns and cities? How do we know this is just a Bridgeport problem? It may not be. It very well could probably be a problem in other places. So how do people really know?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. This is not just a Bridgeport problem.
Correct.
It's just that we see it more in Bridgeport. Perhaps they're more brazen about it in Bridgeport than in other places. But this is not isolated. Not isolated in location, not isolated over time. But to your point, I think what people really need to understand, that I'm going to pick a round number. Let's say that individual in Bridgeport threw 50 absentee ballots into that box. That disenfranchised 50 voters who voted in the other direction, nullified their vote, almost like it didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So every time this happens, everyone who voted properly is disenfranchised. So to your point, and you're absolutely correct, when the system operates like this, people do have to question just how valid their government really is. If people, I mean, in the State House of Representatives, we have seats that are won by single digits and lost by single digits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one person stuffs 10 ballots in a ballot box fraudulently. That's the ball game.
Right. And we see that all the time. I mean, we see that all the time. And I think it again is just, it's really, to me, it's disheartening. And what I find very disappointing is that we echo the message. I mean, we do it here on WICC because we feel it's very important that people go out and vote. It's very hard to ask people to go out and vote, and it's hard to tell people that your vote matters, and it's hard to tell people that it's important to support your local elections. It's not just about the president. It's important that you vote for your local elections all the way down to your town and city councils and your school boards and your planning and zoning commissions. It matters. Does it? Because it's making us feel like it doesn't, when we just would rather know that we've got politicians in place who are going to hold the line and stay with what our party wants. I think it's telling a bigger story. We would rather take the risk of low voter turnout and really having people in Hartford who are not representing their towns and cities because a lot of people aren't coming out to vote. We'd rather hold the line with our parties than have clean elections. That is a very scary storyline that I feel like Connecticut is playing out right now. This year, especially after what was proven in 2023, the fact that if nothing happens in this session, I think the storyline for Connecticut and clean elections, I don't think it's a good one. And it makes it very hard for even entities like our own to support people going out to vote, which I hate saying that, but it's true.
But you know what? Isn't that kind of what they want, though? Then you let the terrorists win, right? There's no better world for the candidates and the campaigns that are doing it wrong, that are committing the crimes. There's no better world for them than for the people who are doing it right to stay home. So if anything, incidents like this, like we saw in Bridgeport and that let's be honest, we believe happen all the time, they should be even more of a motivator. Mm-hmm. Because we're already sort of behind the 8 ball because we know this is happening. So they should be more of a motivator for people to get out and say, hey, you know what? I need to get out to vote, and I've got to bring 2 or 3 friends. Because if you don't do that, the bad guys get exactly what they want. Exactly what they want, and they want you to stay home.
I love that perspective. I love that you just said that, and I'm going to keep that soundbite, and I'm going to play it every single time we have an election. I am. Are you kidding? Because you're so right. Because watching this as a journalist from where I'm sitting, it's really disheartening. When you think about how much we, as Americans fought to have the right to vote and what a privilege it is. I can remember my grandparents who came over from Italy and wow, the amazing rights you have as an American. And it's a shame to see that we don't practice or exercise our right to vote. But when you hear about things like this, it really does deter people. But I love how you just said that, because it's so true. It should actually be more of a motivator that if we come out in numbers, even if you did do illegal activity, numbers are still numbers. If you've got a lot of people coming out and voting correctly, it should still tip the tables in the correct direction. So that's a really great point, Representative Perillo. And I want to thank you so much for, even though you feel that we may not see some concrete legislation come out of the session, you're making waves. I'm telling you, you're all over the news. You're everywhere, and your voice is being heard on many platforms. So I want to thank you for taking this up. And I'm hopeful. I'd love to see something come out of this. So we'll see.
I am too, and this has really been an effort pushed forth by Republicans in the House and in the Senate. And I would like nothing more than for Democrats to get on board with this. It's an opportunity for them to really step up and lead. We'll see if they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll certainly do our part to also keep pushing that as well to our lawmakers across the, both sides of the aisle here on WICC. So again, Representative Perillo, thank you for your time. And I'm sure we'll be in touch again very soon.
Thank you, Melissa.
All right. Again, Representative Jason Perillo here on WICC.